everyone, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and today we are going to dye some self-striping worsted weight yarn using a really long skein that I made on my DIY warping board. I did not intentionally film myself making this really long skein, but I did film a behind the scenes clip for ChemKnits patrons. And so if you want some behind the scenes clips in the future, go and check out the ChemKnits Patreon. There will be a link down below. But the reason why I wasn't specifically filming this warping board is because I made this skein when I was trying to figure out how to use it for the first time. So this skein right here is absolutely over 12 feet long, and it's a circle. So the individual sections are even longer than that. And I'm not sure yet if I want to try to dye it as a 2-color repeat or a 3-color repeat. Counting the strands here, there are 19 loops, which means that the different sections won't necessarily be that wide. If you think about 19 color changes, if you were making a hat or something, that isn't tiny. So I think that I might do a 2-color repeat, because that way if you are using this in a hat, you're more likely to be able to have the stripe long enough to go around your entire head. And I suppose if I take this, which is folded in half, and I wrap it around my head, let's see, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, it would give you a couple rounds. It's long enough that you would be able to get a couple rounds for self-striping on a hat. But this does bring me to a useful point in that when you're dyeing self-striping yarn, you want to consider what you might want to create with that yarn. And therefore that will help you determine the length that you need to achieve your stripes. Because if you are doing a sock, or even a kid's sock, your striping sections can be shorter than if you were to dye fingering or worsted weight yarn for a hat, where you might want longer repeats so you can get a full stripe that is a couple rows wide. I am going to pre-soak this yarn in some plain tap water for probably a couple of hours, just because of how my filming schedule today is working. But I think since I don't mind tonal variation on the yarn, I would be okay with just doing 20 to 30 minutes. Now my plan is to revisit a colorway that I attempted when I was dyeing a commercially dyed blank in the past. And I tried using Radioactive and Gunmetal, hoping for sort of a green and navy type colorway, but the gunmetal actually broke brown and turned brown in the way I had it set up. So I think we're gonna try this using some navy and radioactive today to create our striping colorway. I have laid out our skein here on my countertop. It's still a little twisted, but we're gonna go with it. And I do want to mark the center. And doing one zip tie really tiny can be really hard to undo. So I wonder how it would work to do it with 2. If that will be easier for me to undo later, maybe, maybe not. I don't know, could be a mistake. But once we have the yarn inside our mason jars where we're gonna dye each half at the same time, then I will remove this mark to apply dye up to the midpoint, but I did want to give myself a guide for as I'm starting out with all of this. But the 2 halves, I plan to dye a bit differently. I am going to go ahead and untwist this, and then we'll start with the first side. It does look like I put a lot of ties on here, which is awesome. Past Rebecca, thank you very much. The first color I want to do is rather simple. I just want to do some navy on half of the skein. We are going to do this at about a 1.5% depth of shade. So I'm going to add 1/3 of a cup of my 1% stock solution of Dharma Dark Navy. This is about 80 milliliters of this navy dye. And since I'm going to be adding about 50 grams of yarn onto that side, that's giving us approximately a little over 1.5% depth of shade. But I did spill a little bit, so I don't know if that will impact the color. But now I do want to go ahead and fill this about halfway full, and I am going to rinse out this measuring cup in the process. There is no acid in here yet, and I am going to start carefully adding in half of our yarn. And I guess I need a utensil to help me press it in. And carefully lifting this up, which I won't be able to do for very far, just checking for white spots. And eventually, when we get ready to dye the other side and remove that zip tie, we will put more in. But I think what I will do right now is increase the amount of water that we have in here. Since this yarn is non-superwash, once again, it is just 100% Peruvian Highland wool, colors will spread a little bit more and strike a bit slower than they would if this were superwash. So that works in our favor. For the second half, I have an empty mason jar right here, and starting with the zip tie that is a tie on the yarn, I'm going to put it in with a little bit of our yarn. And now, as we do this, before we add liquid, I want to layer some Dharma Radioactive and Dharma Fluorescent Lemon just onto the yarn. This will sort of result in some speckles potentially in places, more so from the Radioactive than from our lemon. But like the greens can strike a little bit faster, but again, there's no acid on here yet, so I don't know exactly how fast or slow this may go, but I'm just very crudely squirting these colors on, and then when we add water, the colors will spread, giving us sort of this variegated, maybe a bit green and yellow mixture. And so I think that that should be pretty fun. Because there's no reason why when you're doing something self-striping that it has to be like a perfect two tonals. I absolutely could have just repeated what I did with the navy with the Radioactive, but since these colors are known to break, I thought that we could have some fun and set up the mason jar like this, very randomly. Ooh, that navy, I have never seen color wick that much before. That is pretty wild to me. So we're gonna leave this middle, and we can always add more color if I want to later on. But now I wanna get some more water to start filling this up. And yeah, and we'll think about removing these zip ties as well. Actually, I will go ahead and try to remove these right now. I don't think it was any easier to try to do this with two. Maybe a tiny bit, but certainly not that much easier as I get my glove stuck. You know, sometimes I try new things and it works great. Other times, it doesn't. And that is a-okay. But the nice thing about this is it looks like, oh, I have no idea which direction that end goes, but I'll go in with the navy. So we will see. But let's go ahead and add some, now that I've removed that zip tie, let's add some water and acid to our multicolored. All right, I'm gonna add 1 tablespoon of white vinegar to this cup of water right here. And then I'm gonna start pouring it over our yarn, watching these colors well, first of all, we're watching the color compress, but also just watching it spread out a little bit. So let me get my water. 1 tablespoon of white vinegar should be plenty for this mason jar, but the variation that we have in here is going to be really, really small. It will be predominantly, well, actually I see more yellow over there, but the other thing you might notice is that we are dripping here. So what I want to do is soak this up, add that yarn in, and then think, because again, the wicking, I have not seen wicking like that before, but I want to also add a tablespoon, like 1.5 tablespoons of white vinegar to our navy color. And this one's going to be a little bit harder to stir and move. But now we're going to move it closer together. And I think what I might do on this little intermediate section see if I can do this without bringing the navy in. I think that worked. Add a hint of green. There we go. Just so that way we have that base covered as much as possible. So we have a dark, and then we have a more pastel. It's not necessarily that bright, but I also wasn't measuring the amount of dye I added in. I was very much going by feel. But knowing that these fluorescent colors strike so slowly meant that I had a feeling that this kind of situation would work. So now I do need to wait at least a bit before we're able to heat set it. So I think I will be leaving it here on the counter for, I would say 30 minutes to an hour. The reason why I'm not adding this yarn directly to the pot is that the dye pot actually has some other mason jars in it, and once that finishes and we remove those, I also then need to wait for the dye bath to cool, because if I add these glass jars to a really hot dye bath and we have that quick change in temperature, we could get some cracking, and I don't want to do that. I definitely don't want to do that. And so I prefer to allow the temperature changes to happen slower so we can start in a warmish dye bath, but I don't want to just surround it with hot on the outside and then cold on the inside because we have that liquid in there. So it might be a few hours that this is sitting on the counter, but another perk is that this turns it into sort of a cool vat technique, and so it allows some of those colors to absorb a bit slower, which for the navy means we'll get, maybe even with it crowded, a little more even coverage. With our neon, it might also mean we get more even coverage, but that's okay. I just really wanted to layer these colors and have something brighter on one side and something dark on the other. And well, hopefully my navy won't turn brown like the, I think it was gunmetal that I used that time I did something fairly similar. So anyway, in probably a couple hours, we'll check back in. It's been about an hour. I do think I still see some variation in here, but I'm gonna very carefully move this into this pasta insert, and then I'm gonna go put this over on the stove with some water that probably goes up to about here. I really, I'll start turning the heat on because it's gonna take a while to heat up. Hope that the navy isn't going brown. I don't think I've ever had navy go brown. Others have though, so I'm like, okay, phew, that still reads navy to me. But we'll see, we'll see. I do want to add, I think, some more liquid to the bath. I am now increasing the heat. I really don't want the navy to travel into there. I really hope that doesn't happen. But the navy does seem to like wicking up. So maybe what I would like to do is just go ahead and add another tablespoon of vinegar to each side. I'm not really stirring it up, but it shouldn't really hurt. But is it just me, or does the navy keep going like all the way over there? But maybe it's because I dipped it. I don't know. I'm feeling a little nervous, can you tell? But anyway, I am now going to heat this up. I'm going to cover this, and I want the pot to be at about a boil, a little below a boil, for at least 30 minutes. But it is going to take longer than that 30 minutes to get up to temp, because it'll probably take at least 30 minutes for the pot to get really hot. So the total amount of time on the stove will likely be longer than that. But again, the goal is to have the inside be really hot for 30 minutes. And to hope the navy just doesn't completely go in there. I think I'm being really paranoid. I don't know if it's sucking that up like a straw. All right, I have moved it a couple times. The navy is absolutely wicking over to the green. So maybe if I pull it out and like lower that. See, like, why is it acting like a straw? Why? That is so weird. I am so not used to that, but I guess that's just gonna have to be, because I don't want the navy making it into that jar. This is weird. This is really weird. Because in times when I've tried to have something wick up, it didn't work. So I don't know what it is. We're gonna go with this and we'll see what happens. But at least now it's dripping down there versus going into the other jar. All right, I am going to turn off the heat and I will remove that. So it is not currently actively dripping at the moment. I have no idea why that was happening, and I will be honest, I am a little afraid to move things right now. Ooh, but that looks so cool. Ooh, there's some air trapped. I like don't want to move things a ton because I don't want it to start dripping again or mess it up. So I think what I'm going to do is let it cool until I can comfortably handle the yarn, because it is so long that it would be really hard for me to move anything to check without like disturbing things. But I guess what I can do, oh, that looks clear. Okay, that's looking really clear. Well, what does this look? Oh no, see, that looks like it has pigment. If I go into the navy, that looks clear. So that's good. Let's check out this. All right, there's definitely still like the barest hint. I don't even think it shows up on camera. See the barest hint of yellow on my spoon from that. So I'm gonna go ahead and leave everything here and let it cool. And we may end up using a yarn mop for the bath later on, or maybe I'll save that for a leave no dye behind, but for now I'm just letting everything cool. I'm not gonna touch it. It is now the next morning and the yarn is cool and I'm ready to take it to the stove so we can wash it. But as for this leftover color, I will be saving this for a leave no dye behind with some other residual things, even though this isn't unbound color because it did drip out of the pot, but we will use this in another video. All right, let's wash our yarn, and I am first carefully removing our navy. I want to show that this is completely clear, and then let's see if our residual, ooh, this color is so fun. I think, ooh, I love that there are pops of both yellow and green still. The color definitely spread. There's maybe just the barest hint of yellow left in here. The color definitely spread, but we were able to keep the navy from going in. And honestly, this sort of broken green and yellow subtle effect is what I wanted. somehow in my efforts to make sure they were evenly sized, the navy is a fair amount bigger. I'm not sure if this came from some of the shifts when I was trying to help with that navy bleeding or what, but they are not approximately equal size. Oh, that is really funny. Okay, I'm gonna try to keep a hand on there as I do this. I'm gonna add a little bit of some dish soap. Okay, and let's see, of course, here we go, where I want my handle. And I'm not expecting to see any bleeding. We really didn't, even though we didn't measure, we didn't use that much radioactive. Oh, this is so pretty. I love the bright and dark contrast. But since this is non-superwash, I am going to carefully continue to rinse it, remove all that soap. Then I'll put the yarn through my spin dryer, hang it to dry, and we will come back and look at the finished dry yarn. Well, almost finished, because I will need to reskein it, and I plan to knit a swatch. As I suspected, despite my attempts to have this approximately half green, half navy, well, we have a lot more navy. That stripe will be a bit thicker than the bright green / yellow one. And you know what? That is okay. It's not a problem. But for whatever reason, that navy dye was just wicking out of the jar in a way I haven't quite seen. I mean, if this is something that I can do on purpose in the future, it would be really cool to see some color transfer from one jar into another. But again, I don't know if I can make this happen on purpose and what it was about the temperature or the situation that made it work that way today. We are not done here. Now I need to take this long skein and wind it into something that is shorter. And the main reason why I need to do that is that the skein is too big to fit on a swift and it would be really, really hard to knit from it. And knit from it I will. I am also going to make a swatch. That way we can know approximately how big, at least at a particular gauge, each of these stripes would be. And so therefore you can know when you plan out your own self-striping colorways if you want to have something that is longer or if the size that I did this one is approximately correct for your needs. I do want to measure our stripes. The neon section is approximately 2 yards long folded in half, but since this is a loop, that means that we actually have about 4 yards long for this green section. Our navy section would be about 2 yards plus 2 feet. So I guess this would be about 5 yards and 1 foot. How will I wind this into a smaller skein? Well, I will lay it out through probably a couple rooms because it is so long, and then walk back and forth between 2 chairs where I have this around to wind it onto my nitty knotty. I also could take out my warping board. That actually would probably be a little easier to sort of arrange it on there, so that way I could unwrap and rewrap it. But I think given my current setup today, I will be walking between 2 chairs. I changed my mind, and instead of going back and forth between 2 chairs, I'm actually going to use my homemade warping board to unravel the skein and to reskein it so that way it's more manageable. Here is the warping board, which I think I probably showed at the beginning of this video, but I used these railing balusters. We drilled 1/2-inch holes and used dowels that we sanded to put in at intervals. The first step was to untangle the very long skein. But then I'm going to place one end of this going up and over the entire warping board. And then the other, I'm going to start going up and down. I can remove this zip tie now. I am going to go up and down around this board with a goal of having it sort of fairly taut so that way I can unravel it. And actually that's not that bad. So what I can do is now I could separate the up and down portion a little bit more, but I think that this is actually working pretty well. And there we go. So now I should be able to, and not really on camera, but I should be able to bring the yarn up and down and then back around. And it just means I'm not gonna be walking back and forth on a niddy noddy. A lot of times I might have this leaning against a stool while I sit in a chair, so it's a little bit below me, and that's a little bit easier than having it here, but I wanted to be able to show what it looked like. So anyway, now I am going to proceed to unwind it. After winding this yarn into a skein, I did go ahead and knit a swatch, which I'm gonna go unroll. I am not sure that the bright neons are coming through as vibrant as they are in person. It looks a little bit washed out because of the navy. I knit this swatch with 40 stitches across on US size 7 knitting needles. And for each of the colors, we have at least 5 full rows. We almost have 6 rows of our neon, and of our navy, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. On the navy, we probably have 7.5 rows with this 40 stitches across swatch. So if I were to make a hat, and a lot of times with hats, I might go down to even like a US size 5 knitting needle. These stripes are long enough that if I were to make a hat with 100 stitches around, we would absolutely see a self-striping pattern still on the hat. In addition to giving a sense of how big the stripes are, these swatches give us a good sense of the tonal variation we have in both the navy and our neon stripe. Within the neon, I do see the more patches of green. I mean, it's all yellow green, and some of the more yellow spots still lean a little bit green, but we did use those different colors on the yarn. And so you can see that you do feel that in there, even though it is a subtle tonal difference. Anyway, I am now going to unravel this and wind it back into the skein. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and I really hope that you enjoyed this video where I created self-striping yarn on a worsted weight base. I know that I don't frequently include swatches in my videos. I dye so many different colorways every year that I don't have the capacity to swatch every single colorway I do. But I do think that the information is really helpful with a self-striping colorway, because if you are planning out something, this way you can make a skein big enough, or at least know a starting place to create the self-striping yarn that you want for yourself. So I really hope that this was helpful. Don't forget to subscribe to the ChemKnits Tutorials YouTube channel, and if you're already subscribed, please or if you're not subscribed, please give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. It really does help the content here on this YouTube channel. I post at least 2 yarn dyeing videos every single week, and we have bonus live streams and other dyeing special events, and it is so much fun. I'm gonna need to play with this color combination more. I love this almost tennis ball, which tennis balls lean a little more yellow typically, but it feels tennis ball. It makes me think of a ball and racket. I don't know. I'm really enjoying it and need to play with this combination more in the future. Thank you so much for watching.